as I mentioned before, we'll be starting from the city attorney and moving in this direction with our answers, if you don't mind. So the first question regards ranked choice voting. In a recent San Francisco Chronicle, in a recent San Francisco Chronicle piece written by the editor John Diaz, he criticized your campaigns. It's fair to mention because he criticized basically everyone equally. In a piece entitled "The Distinct Lack of Vision," Diaz wrote, "There is something underwhelming about the websites of the 9 prominent candidates. The most striking of all the websites, the most striking characteristic was the almost universal aversion to bold ideas of risk. Some strategists believe that low-profile, low-fiber campaigns are the key to emerging from a crowded field in the first true test of ranked choice voting in the San Francisco mayoral election. So the question is, has the ranked choice voting system made it smart to avoid taking specific policy positions in a crowded mayoral field? Was this a fair criticism? And is ranked choice voting a good way to elect a mayor in San Francisco?" So I'll start with Mr. Herrera, please. And we'll ask 1 minute to respond to each of these questions.
I guess we'll all let you know after we see the results in November, right? I actually don't think that the editorial was entirely fair. I think there's been a decided lack of coverage by the Chronicle with respect to all these candidates and what they stand for. And I can tell you that we already had drawn out policy differences between us. Just the other night I asked Leland at a debate if he was for gang injunctions, something I'm obviously been a proponent of, and he said he wasn't. But I know I've gone through and looked at everybody's website, and they all have specific policy positions out there. I know that Supervisor Dufty just released something today. I've released a schools plan. I've released an 18-point jobs plan. So I don't think that the criticism was entirely fair. I know all these guys are dedicated to being substantive. With respect to, is it a good way to elect a mayor? I think there are pluses and negatives, but what I do think is it makes the choices for the electorate much more difficult, because it is much more difficult to highlight the differences that exist. But I don't necessarily think that's because of the lack of substance on behalf of any of these candidates. And I know that everybody is decidedly interested in talking about the substance. I happen to be elected when I'm city attorney in a runoff. I'm partial to runoffs. I think it's good to have that one-on-one debate with an individual, and I think it serves the electorate better to have clear distinctions amongst candidates.
Thank you.
I would agree with Dennis that I think that the Chronicle's suggestion that this race has not yet been that interesting has been a function of the fact that, one, it is early, but two, with this new system, fortunately, I think campaigning has been much more positive than it has been in recent years. And I think from my perspective, that is a good thing, because one of the real challenges at City Hall is that over the past decade, we have had some very, very negative politics. We've had boards of supervisors and mayors who've just fought constantly. And from my perspective, I think it is a good turn for the better when we have an opportunity to talk about leadership that can actually bring folks together, that can actually build, that can bring our diverse communities together. What's amazing about this campaign is we get to go all over the city in rooms like this and see thousands of families, to see thousands of San Franciscans who are all experiencing similar things but in different communities. And part of what we want to do with my campaign is, again, to reach out and bring everyone from all pockets of the city who are dealing with the same issues of the economy, of schools, of families, to bring all this together so that we can move our city forward.
I think ranked choice voting is really confusing for people. When I'm out doing neighborhood talks, people are so excited when they tell me, oh, last November I was really excited about this candidate, so I put their name down 3 times, which is not the way to get someone elected. So I do think it's a confusing process. I think it's good if we're nice and supportive of one another. I do think, though, that we're all distinctive. I always said for me, I was an important voice in the dialogue. I started talking about public education, and when I first started talking about it, people said that's not the job of the mayor. I truly believe the mayor has to be the chief education advocate, And the mayor doesn't run the public schools, but the mayor sits in a unique position to pull the whole community together to impact this. And in terms of our website, if the person had really spent time, on our website you can form your own policy discussion. People can talk about whatever they want to talk about, and they can take the discussion as far as they would like. And I agree with you, I just don't think there's been enough coverage of this debate and this dialogue, and I hope that this will be the starting point of it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I actually, for once, think the Chronicle's right. I believe that we are running campaigns that often conceal our differences rather than reveal our differences. And I want to talk about how I'm different from other people. I am not afraid to talk about widening disparities in wealth. I'm not afraid to talk about being opposed to giving tax breaks to wealthy companies, $7 billion companies, when our classroom sizes are increasing, when our parks are being privatized. I'm not afraid to make those distinctions. I'm not afraid to talk about wanting to tax wealthier people in San Francisco. I want to look at doing an income tax of the highest income earners in this city. Barack Obama came to San Francisco about 3 months ago. He came on a Monday, left on a Wednesday, $13 million he took away with him for his campaign. He needs that money, but we also need some of that money to make sure our schools run, that Muni's running on time. I'm not afraid to talk about those things, and I hope you can understand that we need to talk about those things to give you a sense of who you want to support for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that same article that John referred to, John Diaz, did single out my website for two distinct differences that none of the other candidates up here are willing to talk about. First and foremost is pension reform. I do not go along with the pension reform plan that was negotiated by Ed Lee and the unions. It falls $300 million short per year of what is needed in this city. My plan calls for a contributory level of all new employees that will pay off those unfunded liabilities in 10 to 15 years without penalizing those who are retired or those who are invested in the system. Secondly, homelessness. Homelessness, the administration of our homeless nonprofit service industry providers, if there is such a handle, is costing you 10 times more today, $1.6 billion, versus the $200 million was costing in Willie Brown's last term in office. I intend to address those two problems. I don't know if my other candidates here are or willing to. I intend to make this campaign about those two problems. Ranked choice voting, hey, who knows? There's a big argument that it will satisfy the bigger interest of the community. I don't know. That's what we're stuck with. That's what I'm campaigning in. That's what I got to live with. So we're here and let's deal with it.
Let me talk a little bit about ranked choice voting and how I think it has really changed the way in which we are all campaigning. In ranked choice voting, it's not about your number 2 votes. It's your number 1 vote. It's your number 2s and your number 3s. And what that has done, and I'm sure it is the case for all of us here, is that no longer can you go out into the city and just identify where your base is, and just try to then make sure that that base that you have is going to continue to be out there and support you. What ranked choice is doing is forcing all of us to think about what are the other communities that we ought to be going out to try and capture number 2 and number 3 votes. And that is the essence of ranked choice. What it does do is to force all the candidates to go beyond our comfort zone, outside of our communities, and reach to all individuals. And that, I think, is extremely important. Whoever's going to be the mayor, it's got to represent everybody. Not just your comfort zone, not just your community, not just your friends and your buddies and your classmates, but everyone. And to that extent, ranked choice has done a tremendous public service for the city and county of San Francisco, and I hope that we all take advantage of that.
I do agree that ranked choice voting has probably made this election a little more nice, and that we are reaching out to constituencies that we haven't. But with all due respect to Mr. Diaz, I don't know if he actually knew how to use my website. Because we're actually on a website which is actually trying to gauge all of you, not just him. We're trying to get all your opinions, and if you would have gone on today, you would have saw a video that we shot of homeless folks talking about the benefits of Care Not Cash. Because there's a ballot measure right now that we believe will actually gut the very measure that we passed a number of years ago. If you went on to the website, you would learn about Muni, and you'd learn about whether the new NJUDA Express is actually faster than the NJUDA. You learn about the Clipper card and all the pitfalls of the Clipper card. You learn about all the different ideas we're looking at to make Muni run faster. And lastly, you would see thousands of San Franciscans talking about ideas to make the city better. Not today, not tomorrow, but today. And that's what we need. We need to start today to make the city better.
Well, I would say, as regards to John Diaz, that the role of the press is not to make us more comfortable. And so, human nature being what it is, I've got to imagine that we all looked at our websites and thought how we could make them a bit better, and I think that that's a constructive thing to do. This past weekend, Chuck Nevius wrote in a column, and he questioned some of us if we were aggressively speaking out against a measure to gut Care Not Cash. And I had issued a press release and sent it out. And he said, that I hadn't really taken a stand, and I was a little feisty when I called him, and we went to lunch yesterday, which is the way you go. And I think his point to me was, it's not just putting yourself out there, it's aggressively putting yourself out there. And so, again, I think it's fine. I think that's what we should be doing, is hearing from the constituents, hearing from the press, and again, the press is out there to tweak us a bit. And what are they tweaking us about? Mayor Ed Lee, who's doing a darn good job, I would tell you. I honestly think he's doing an outstanding job for the city. And so I think there are going to be two phases of this campaign as he decides whether he's going to run or not. And so I think you're going to see a different campaign once that decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to ranked choice voting specifically, and I'd like to focus my comments on that, truthfully, I think that the system is very confusing. I know that as a candidate, there's nothing stranger, quite honestly, than going into a room and saying to people, please vote for me for number one. I'd really like your support. But by the way, if you like someone else more, vote for me for number two. It is not something as a candidate that I'm used to doing. I'm used to going out there, speaking my mind, having real honest debates, going back and forth with people. I think you said this, I thought you had meant that. This is what I would like to get across, and that really does not seem to happen. And I do agree with John's comments on that regard. I do think it becomes a little boring, because you are trying to go after first votes, and you're trying to go after second votes, and you're trying to go after third votes. And so I hope that we all use our websites and whatever media we possibly can to define ourselves so that you'll be able to go out and vote. The other one thing that I want to say that I think is very important is something that Joanna had mentioned, which was that people go out there and vote for one person 3 times thinking that that strengthens your vote. In fact, your ballot is then thrown out because you have voted incorrectly. And so it is problems like that that make ranked choice voting very dangerous.
Thank you very much.